Welcome to another episode of Courageous Healing. I am the co-host and producer, Victor Escalante. And joining me as usual in the studio is Adele George. Adele, welcome to another episode.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. It's happy to be here. I'm so excited to be here for another podcast.
Awesome. So what are we talking about today, Adele?
Today, our last podcast, we talked about identity. And one of the things that I was thinking about when it came to identity was in order to springboard your identity, in order to springboard your healing, you have to change your identity. However, one of the things that I think that we need to talk about in moving through the steps of changing your identity, and one that I think is really important, is forgiveness. And forgiveness can be a really ugly word to a whole lot of people. And I want to take it and I want to throw it out on the table for everyone.
That is a lot to unpack. So where do you want to start? Because I happen to know something about forgiveness.
I think we all know something about forgiveness, but what I really want to talk about, and while we can go into significant amounts of detail in the process of forgiveness, I think what I want to talk about right here that's really important is what forgiveness does.
Okay.
What happens when you forgive someone? And because we're going to stick, since we are talking domestic violence, let's just stick to that as a topic.
Okay.
For the example of this. So when you're in a situation where you're being abused, sexually assaulted, domestic violence, anything like that, and the person that does this to you obviously causes intense harm, and it imprints on you and changes your life completely. And like we talked about in the last episode, it changes your identity. And in order to move forward, one of the things that you have to do is you have to lay your past down. Your past has to stay in the past. The steps in order to do this is forgiveness. But you have to understand that forgiveness is not, we're not talking about forgiveness from a religious aspect. We are talking about forgiveness from a psychological aspect. We're talking about it from an internal aspect in the communications that you have with yourself. Because not only do you and should you potentially forgive the person that harmed you, and I'll speak from my own personal experiences shortly, but you need to forgive yourself too. Because you're carrying around this weight on your shoulders that's probably not only just from what the harm that was done to you, but also any sort of guilt that you've probably, and anything that other people have told you, or said to you. Why did you let this happen?
Yeah. So I was on a radio call today, Adele, because they wanted to interview me. They wanted to talk about letting go of shame and guilt. Okay. And this is what triggered my memory as I was listening to you. In a study that was done, a lot of people were asked as they were nearing the end of their life. They asked them, what is the number one regret that you have? And most people, surprisingly, Adele said, I regret that I was very liberal in giving compassion to others, but I didn't give it to myself. It's like we are the hardest on ourselves. And the road, the path in life sometimes is hard enough in order for us to add more weight to it, as opposed to traveling lightly by giving ourselves grace, by forgiving ourselves, by focusing on our own mistakes as learning experience that we were ill prepared to handle, that we made mistakes, we learn from it, we evolve, but God doesn't keep score on what you've done wrong for you to pile on more guilt and more shame upon yourself. Forgive yourself, let go, and just realize that many situations that you came upon, you were ill prepared. You were totally inexperienced in what you needed to do. That's why things happen, and life goes on. So back to you, Adele, about forgiveness. In your experience, what definition would you give forgiveness?
For me, the definition that I give forgiveness is a couple of things. One is obviously compassion for the person that has done harm, but that's not necessary. It's basically just releasing the person from what they've done to you. And it's taking that and saying that this person can no longer harm me and they can no longer do harm to me. So, and now it's time for me to forgive and to let it go. And so, in my particular instance, is a little different where I ended up coming to a space of compassion because once I really got older and I got more distance from it and I started to understand his story, my ex husband's story, and what he went through, I started to realize that this was the stuff that caused him to become the person that he became.
You just gave our listeners gold. So let me unpack that, Adele.
Okay.
So, listeners, what she's describing is if you are triggered by your victimizer, by your abuser, I want you to imagine age regressing them into a little boy because we don't hate little children because they are more of a divine nature. And when we age regress them to before they were damaged and before they became conscious of or unconsciously making mistakes and doing harm to others, they were once in a divine state. And so by you minimizing their age, you're able to see them from a totally different lens. You're able to see them through the eyes of compassion as opposed to being adults that are ogres that you want to kill because of what they did to you.
Right. Right. And now, in understanding that at this point, you're at a distance from what has happened to you.
That's correct.
This is not a healing. This is not something that you try 6 months out of a trauma experience. This is when you're absolutely a ways away from it and you're working through your healing process. And forgiveness has a weird connotation to it because in we know in many religious sects that they tell you you need to forgive. You need to forgive. You need to forgive. You don't ever need to forgive. Forgiveness comes with comprehension and understanding. So it's a different level of forgiveness when you come to a place of comprehension and understanding. My ex is where he needs to be for the safety of not only himself, but for the community. He is not healthy and he needs to be where he is.
And he'll never be free again. He will die in prison.
Right. Exactly. However, knowing what he went through as a child with being molested for a number of years and things like that, those are the things that created who he is because it affected his young brain and his young mind and his psyche in a developmental stage of life. And so from a psychiatric standpoint you have to understand that this child brain has just been scrambled.
Yes, he was stunted in his growth, and so he's like a little boy in a grown man's body.
Right. But for me, it was like, it was an oh shit moment. I'll be perfectly honest with you. When I sat down,
Yes.
I realized that it was like, oh shit, he got fucked, and he got into a situation, not got into, he was in a situation that caused the damage that happened to him. And at that moment, my heart opened up. It wasn't
Sure.
love, it was compassion and understanding.
In that moment, your identity changed because you let go. You were no longer being defined by that anger and rage you were holding on to. So, by letting go, detaching from the emotion, you were able to experience a quantum leap in your healing.
Absolutely, and it came in 2 different ways, because that was the first one, and then the second one was the realization that I didn't do this to myself. I didn't intend.
You didn't invite it, you did not initiate it, you did not control it. These were things that were done to you outside of your control.
Right.
Your will was imposed by his will. And so, again, that was the attachment, that was the bond that was holding you captive. And
Yes.
so, by you consciously using your divine will to reclaim that freedom, you were able to let go.
Absolutely. And by this point, I had long been out of therapy. This is just something that I just happened to be thinking about one day, and it was like a light bulb went off. But I think it's important. And I think it's important to understand that we're not telling you, like, the priest on the corner church or the pastor at your church is telling you you need to forgive him because of something that's said in the Bible or in a book.
Mhm.
And Victor and I have it's a slightly different views of religion, but that doesn't impede this conversation. But we're telling you is that you don't need to forgive anybody. You don't have to forgive them. What we're telling you is that when you come to the point of having compassion, you come to understand why it happened, and forgiveness just happens.
Sure. So, listeners, I'm going to actually give you a process that you can follow for you to find your own forgiveness towards yourself, towards anybody. Okay. And I'm actually borrowing this from Barbara. I want to say Barbara DeAngelis. Don't quote me, but I think that's her name. She is the ex-wife of John Gray. Remember John Gray, Adele?
Yep.
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Yep.
He actually, in one of her books, or actually, it was an audio program. I'm dating myself here. I had the audio tapes, the cassette tapes. She says, what you got to do is you have to peel the emotions like an onion, and the very outer layer is going to be anger and rage. So what you do is you sit down and write a letter, not on the computer. You actually have to write it by hand with pen or pencil. The actual act of engaging, of moving your hand and putting a pen to paper, what happens is that there's an act of co-creating. There's magic in taking something that is abstract and in the mind and actually putting it on paper. So what you do, and I'm going to give you the layers. First, you talk about how you are angry at that person, how much you are so angry for what they did to you. You're listening to Courageous Healing Podcast. We'll be right back.
What does it take to rise after the unthinkable? Courageous Healing is the powerful true story of Adele M. George, a woman who survived the unimaginable and chose not just to live, but to heal, thrive, and lead. From the shadows of domestic violence to becoming a voice of strength for survivors, Adele takes you on a raw, unfiltered journey of resilience, redemption, and hope. If you or someone you love is on a healing journey, this book is your companion, your inspiration, your proof that survival is just the beginning. Courageous Healing, now available on Amazon. Start your healing. Rewrite your story.
We now return you to the Courageous Healing Podcast. The next step is you talk about how you are hurt. So anger is first after you finish writing, and it can be as simple as one or two sentences. And what you'll find is if you do it automatically, your subconscious mind is actually going to take over and it's going to develop a life of its own, the letter writing. So then you go into how much you were hurt by what they did to you. And then you're going to go into how you're afraid moving forward with your own life, how you're afraid of how you were impacted. You're afraid for them because we're detaching layer by layer, Adele. And then you enter into you're actually going into you so that you begin to identify the different feelings, the nuance of how you've been carrying all these feelings. Once you get past the fear, then you go into how you regret all the regrets that you have. So, like in your case, Adele, if you were theoretically writing a letter to Chad, you could write about all the regrets that you had about that relationship and all the pain that happened in that relationship, because maybe some part of you did want to have children, but you never did because you knew that that would be the craziest thing to do was to bring a child into that kind of dysfunction. And so you have regrets about not having a family. You have regrets about your dream being shattered of growing old and dying together. It's like you really do some really deep soul searching as a result of this letter, because you're gonna find parts of yourself in this letter that maybe you never really confronted or never dealt with. You're gonna pick up the pieces also. So after you write about regrets, you talk about remorse, the remorse that you have about moving forward, and then you talk about forgiveness. At that point, when you've gone through the steps, you will soften your heart and you will open your heart, and then you will write about forgiveness. But it's forgiveness to let go. It is not necessarily forgiving and forgetting. It's not about that, guys. It's about forgiving to let go. It's like you are forgiving yourself for some of the mistakes you made in whether it was choosing that person, being with that person, engaging with that person. You're forgiving them also by giving them grace. And because now you have it for yourself. So now you can give what you possess. Now you can give what you have, because before the concept of forgiving is theoretical because you don't have it in you. So at that point, you have it in you to forgive. And then you finally end up writing about how you love that person from an altruistic point of view, altruistic love. It's not the romantic fantasy. It's not that you'll ever be with that person. Maybe even just you love the memories that you shared with them, because I'm sure in even if it was all self-made, Adele, in being with Chad, I'm sure that you have some memories to where you experience some level of happiness. And again, I know in your case it would be truly legit love that you would have for him. But again, this is more like an agape kind of love. It's a principle love. About as easy as I can define it. It's a principle love of the Bible.
Well, and I think there's a couple of things to your point. One is that, first of all, and this is important, and it's in with the first step of what you're talking about, is understand the cost of holding
Sure.
on to the hurt.
Like they say, Adele, holding on to hurt or anger is like they built a fortress in your head and they're living rent free.
Mhm.
It's a very heavy price to pay to be tormented by them living in your head.
Right. And so the whole point of this forgiveness process in the way that I see this is you if you're living your life on the defensive because you're angry because of someone or something, or you're angry that you allowed yourself to do this or be subjected to this, you're staying on the defensive and you're shutting yourself off from the abundance that life has to offer.
Yes.
So the whole point about this in talking about forgiveness is, again, to change your identity, to really re-identify with who you are by laying down the layers of your past. You can
Yes.
lay down the incident, then I can lay down the human being, because look, I understand what this man did to me, and I do not have empathy for the fact that what he did to me. He is where he belongs, but I have compassion and empathy for the human and what was created and what happened to him. So all of a sudden, he became nothing to me. He
Exactly.
became nothing.
Yes.
He's just a part of my past. He's
Yes.
a part of my life. And so
He's a
and
part of your life, but he is apart from your life.
exactly, exactly. And so, and by doing that and by letting that go, it catapulted my healing process.
Yes.
and I woke up and forgiving myself, and letting all of this stuff go. You don't have to be burdened by this. And that's the whole point.
Yes.
You don't have to be burdened by what happened to you. Look, I understand. I'm talking about this from an aspect of sexual assault, domestic violence. I understand that there's people out there that have been through things that I can't relate. I am talking about this in particular. So if somebody's going to try to argue with me about this, I'm coming from what we know. We both are coming from what we know.
Sure.
However, I want that abundance in my life. I want
Yeah, you're cutting yourself off from fully living your life and being blessed, having a blessed life. Okay, why continue to pay the price? Like this lady I was working with this past the Saturday, I told her, by you continuing to carry this load, you're aging prematurely. Your health is starting to wane, and you're starting to pay the heavy price for all of the biochemical reactions that all these feelings, all these toxic feelings that you've been carrying is having an effect on your physical body as well as your bottom line in your business. So why continue to pay the price? I told her, I said, you paid your karma. You need to imagine a contract that says paid in full.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you deserve, and she deserves, and we deserve, and everyone deserves to live their fullest life, and they deserve to live their best life.
Absolutely. As I was listening to you, Adele, I was reminded of one gentleman that I worked with years ago in the criminal justice system, that he was very bitter and very angry towards a man that accidentally killed his daughter in a head on accident when he suffered a seizure. Okay. He suffered a seizure. Again, it was a total accident. And so he was very bitter and angry as to why he didn't take his medication. He really didn't know why he had a seizure, because he held a driver's license to be able to drive. And so anyway, what happened is he started drinking after his daughter was killed, and of course, several DWIs put him in prison. And when he got out, he had done some kind of rehab program in prison, but that was not enough. And so when I helped him to heal at the deepest level, he was able to get in touch with that sage mindset, that he was able to let it go. To I wouldn't necessarily say forgive the man that killed his daughter, but at least disconnect from the bitterness and the hurt, to where he was a nothing. He no longer lived in his mind, and he was able to get back to writing poetry. He was actually quite an accomplished writer, and I encouraged him to continue to write because that was very healing. He brought me a notebook of his writings, and it was beautiful poetry. And I said, you're really talented, and you really need to get into this because this can be very healing. So again, anyone that wants to argue with us is like, we have not walked in your shoes. And maybe some of what Adele and I are saying may not necessarily apply 100%, but if it applies 90% and you're able to run with some point that we share with you, it's all worth it.
Absolutely. And again, what's the cost of not?
Yeah. What do you got to lose? If
You
you
know,
don't start the healing journey now, win.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. If not now, when? And the hardest part that I think some people have is that means they have to put themselves first.
And it takes courage. It takes courage to heal. It takes courage to say, I matter here, and it's me, myself, and I. Okay.
And this is simply why we named the book Courageous Healing. Because
Exactly.
healing is not, again, it's not, I don't want to tell people that it's not easy. I don't want to tell people that it's hard to scare them off. But it's a journey, and it's something that you have to commit through, and it's not linear, but the harder you commit to it, the more you go at it, the faster you will come out of it.
Yes. Totally.
The harder, and so forgiveness, understanding your identity. Listen to our podcast from last week.
Yeah.
The other one that we had, not last week, whenever we posted it. But listen to it and understand how your identity is shaped. And then understand that, there's layers of this, and forgiveness is the next layer of moving through it. And it's not an easy process, but like you said, there are ways to come to understand that these people who did these things to you didn't come out of the womb that way.
Yes. One final thing before I forget, burn the letter, okay?
Yeah.
Burn the letter, because when you burn, the fire cuts through all the different dimensions.
Yeah.
And you're able to totally sever the emotional and etheric ties to that other individual.
100%.
What do you think, Adele? Is that enough show?
I think we've given them a lot of information.
That's a lot to unpack.
It is.
So we're gonna have to leave it there. Until next time, friends, go out and have a great week.
Bye, guys.